All right, we are all set to go.
Do you want me to admit someone who's in the waiting room? Oh.
No, I just did. Good. Right. Ready to go. All right. Greetings, everyone. It's 4 o'clock Pacific time, and we're going to start our weekly Sunday seminar. Our topic this week is going to be diabetes and the COVID-19 pandemic. And before we start, we always want to acknowledge the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. It is their land and their blood that flows through each and every one of our veins, every step we take in this hemisphere. So we owe a great debt and appreciation for them for hosting us for the last 500 plus years. So we always acknowledge them in everything that we do. And we also acknowledge our African ancestors who fought from the eastern shores of East Africa all the way to the western shores of the Western Hemisphere. Our African ancestors have fought for us to be free. And the fact that we are fighting today is only because we have been the inheritors of their legacy. So we always honor them and thank them. And we thank all people who fight for justice in this world today. So we're going to go through this topic. And I do want to say that this particular topic, we had a lot less people show interest in this seminar this week than we've had in the previous weeks. Every week we've had hundreds of people between the Zoom platform and Facebook live streaming, and we didn't have nearly as many people show interest. And I would surmise that the reason for that is people don't really, if they're not diabetic themselves, or even a lot of people that are diabetic are in complete denial about it. So people don't really see this as the type of sexy type of political issue, like some of the issues we've been talking about in the previous weeks. But we just want to say that we think that this is no less a political issue than anything else, because diabetes is without question a social disease, as we'll talk about. And that is the reason why it is primarily colonized people, African people, indigenous people, people who are of the working poor, who are primarily the people who are impacted by this disease. That's not an accident. It's because of the political and economic conditions that we face. So we think it's no less political than anything else we have talked about and that we will talk about. So those of you that are joining us today, we really thank you for coming in. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started with what we're going to be doing for the next hour. And as always, as we always start, we start by acknowledging that these seminars are not individual seminars. They're not just something coming out of my head or Shakura's head. They are aspects of the organizational program of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And I've been a longtime organizer for the AAPRP. I've done work for the party on 3 continents and the Caribbean, and will, for every breath I have left, continue to do that work. And if you look on the left side of this picture, you'll see that these are examples of 2 events we've had in the last week that have taken place. The APRP, our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa. And so for us, the way forward to achieve this objective is through the strategy laid out by our founder, Kwame Nkrumah, in the book you see at the top there, the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. And in that book, he talked about the need to unite all of the revolutionary African political formations in Africa into one unified fighting force to achieve Pan-Africanism. And so the 2 posters you see here are examples of that. A week ago, we had that event in commemoration of the 59th year of the defeat of US imperialism in its attempt to invade socialist Cuba. And that event was sponsored by one of our sister parties in Africa, the Amilcar Cabral Ideological Institute in Nigeria. And you can see on the poster, we had comrades from our AAPRP chapter in Ghana participate in that, as well as one of our comrades who is a joint member of the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, as well as the All African People's Revolutionary Party in Guinea-Bissau. So, you know, that's 3 organizations that we are fused with that event represents. And at the bottom, yet another event last weekend that was a question of COVID-19, protecting civil liberties, that was representative of one of the speakers of our APRP in the Detroit, Michigan, US area, as well as one of the members of the Pan-Africanist Congress, another sister party formation that we have that's located in Tanzania, or what you would call South Africa. So that's our strategy on the ground, and that's the work we're doing. And we also have community defense projects that we build here in the Western Hemisphere. And we have principled relationships with all of the national liberation movements who are fighting for the same justice that we are. Whether you're talking about the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, the Palestinian national liberation struggle, the Filipino national liberation struggle, the Irish Republican national liberation struggle, all of those struggles we see as a part of our struggle to liberate our mother, Africa. And as for myself, I'm a prolific blogger and author. And then today, as always, I'm joined by my amazing daughter, Shakura, who is a student working on her doctorate degree. She has achieved a significant education and activism in the areas of public health, communications, and psychology. And so today we're going to be sharing this presentation on the topic of diabetes and COVID-19. So unless there's anything, let's see, with that, we'll go ahead and get started with talking about this very important issue. So let's just say first that what is diabetes? Like, what is it? What does it constitute? How does it happen? And so it stems from the issue of insulin. And insulin is a natural chemical. And I want to say first, I forgot to say this, that, you know, obviously myself and Shakura, we're not doctors, we're not endocrinologists, but what we are is she has extensive study in the area of public health. She's preparing to get her PhD in that area. And I have been diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic for the last 18 years. 18 years ago, I was diagnosed. And so I've learned quite a bit about how to properly manage this disease. And so that's the perspective that we're coming from. But if, you know, you should certainly seek a doctor's counsel if you have not and you suspect that you're diabetic. Okay, so just definitely want to say that. And then our activism and our organizing work allows us to put this in the proper perspective from a political standpoint, because diabetes is a political disease, like everything is political in the society. A woman in Ghana told me once that even using the bathroom is a political act. And if you didn't understand that before, certainly with the hoarding of toilet paper today, that should be quite clear to you now. So diabetes is certainly a political disease. So when we talk about insulin, we talk about it from the standpoint that it's a chemical that the pancreas produces, and it produces it into your bloodstream. And it does that to allow the insulin to control the sugars that you eat. And what we mean by sugars is that everything that you eat, except for meat and leafy green vegetables, converts to sugar, or what's commonly called carbohydrates. And so the insulin serves to break down the foods that convert to sugar. So, you know, you can eat a Snickers bar or you can eat an apple. Both of them are going to convert to sugar. The question is, the healthier your food, or the more fiber that it has, the longer it takes to break down in sugar. And the longer it takes, the more time your body has to absorb it in a healthy way. Something like a Snickers bar breaks down immediately. So all of a sudden you eat the Snickers bar and you have all this sugar in your system. So the insulin serves to break that sugar down. But if you're diabetic, if you're type 1 diabetic, your body doesn't produce insulin. And if you're type 2, at some point in the stage of your development as a human being, your body stopped producing enough natural insulin on its own to perform this process of breaking down the foods you eat, the carbohydrates, into sugars. And so, like I said, meat, leafy greens, other than that, everything else turns to sugar. Carbohydrates, and then carbohydrates is what your body uses to burn as energy. So you need carbohydrates to have energy. If your body doesn't have enough carbohydrates, then it starts burning protein. And for a lot of people, that can begin to develop into issues all of its own. So understanding insulin, what is diabetes then? Diabetes is when, as I mentioned, the pancreas is either not producing enough insulin or it doesn't produce any at all. For type 1, it doesn't produce any. For type 2 diabetics, it doesn't produce enough. And so the sugar comes in your body, the carbohydrates break down into sugar, and they stay in your bloodstream. Okay, so when this happens, when the sugar stays in your bloodstream, what happens is it begins to cause clots in your bloodstream. And so this is why you see people who are suffering with diabetes and not able to control it. They have this phenomenon happening where they have these intensive blood clots, and a lot of times people have to have amputations because of these blood clots. And it's because the sugar in their body is not being burned off. So now I'm going to turn it over to Shakura, and she's going to talk about women with gestational diabetes.
Okay, so thank you first for having me. And as we all know, the AAPRP is foundationally funded in understanding that, you know, women are the future, and we need to understand how we can better support them so that we can have a better socialist unified country and continent. So with that being said, I want to first start off by saying gestational diabetes is a diabetes that is founded when a woman is pregnant. And so we know that even if we are not pregnant ourselves, because we identify as cis men or whatever the case may be, being pregnant is something that affects all of us because that's a global social issue as well. And so we want to make sure that we understand that in the United States, there's between 1 and 2 pregnant women who already are diagnosed as having type 1 or type 2 diabetes. And from that same percentage, 6 to 9% of pregnant women will develop gestational diabetes. It is also known from a study by Kaiser Permanente in 2011 that African descent women who develop gestational diabetes during pregnancy have a 52% higher chance of developing diabetes in the future compared to European white women who develop gestational diabetes during pregnancy. So just right off the top, you know, we need to acknowledge white supremacy. We need to acknowledge colonialism. We need to acknowledge that environmental built environment. So people literally being able to go outside and walk on sidewalks, being able to go running at night when the street lights are broken or out of order. These are all contributing factors. Racism definitely is a contributing factor to why women are developing diabetes when they're pregnant. And so it's not really an individual issue where a lot of doctors are telling her that she needs to exercise more, but it's really a global issue, and that we need to figure out ways to deconstruct these physical built environments, but also social built environments that are preventing pregnant women from having access to resources. And if we don't know already, pregnant women are already more vulnerable because their body is going through so many psychological changes, psychological and biological, I should say. So that's more of a reason why they're vulnerable, which is why we need to acknowledge their eating habits, their support from their families, their colonial and consciousness of society and how those things factor in, and then access to resources, because a lot of the people that are quoted in the study probably don't live in the best environments where they even have access to a fresh fruit market place to get fresh fruits and vegetables. So we're talking about food insecurity, again, these built environments. We're talking about access to healthcare. We're talking about treatment in healthcare and how a lot of providers have their implicit biases and their racism when they deal with African women. So all these things are contributing factors to how she is supposed to get the fresh fruits and vegetables, but also the mental fresh fruits and vegetables, if you catch my drift, so that she can be the best that she can be, not just for herself, but for her child. And so on that note, how do we prevent this from happening? So I just want to point out that African children are more likely to be born with low birth weight. And for those that don't know, the woman is supposed to have an uninterrupted 42-week pregnancy cycle. So a lot of times what happens is if she has gestational diabetes, it's a way for OBGYNs and other providers to interfere and suggest cesarean sections or inductions, which interrupts that pregnancy cycle, causing the baby to be born sooner than they naturally need to be born. This also means that the baby has not fully had a chance to grow in the way that they should be growing, which is why they're born with low birth weight. And if they're born with low birth weight, then that introduces other issues that could cause pregnancy complications for her, but also for the baby in terms of gaining that weight back faster once they are born, because everyone who is born within 2 weeks loses birth and is supposed to gain it back. But if the baby is already born with a shorter amount of weight, then it makes it harder for them to gain back. On that same note, I want to identify that oral care is related to gestational diabetes, believe it or not. And a lot of women don't have access to a dentist. Maybe it's because of their income. Maybe it's because of their lack of education. Maybe it's because the dentist is not in the same zip code as where they can get access to healthcare. Whatever the barrier is, women are not taking care of their teeth, their gums, and their tongues the way that they should be. And so because of it, it's causing issues where blood is being tampered with and not being sent throughout the body as it should be, because gum disease is linked to heart disease and other issues like that. So I just want us to all be mindful that this is all related in terms of how we support them. So believe it or not, the next time you go to a baby shower, I'm proposing that you bring a toothbrush and make sure that you have a conversation with the family about what oral care looks like, especially if she doesn't have access to those resources to get that information on her own. And so on that note, how do we prevent this? So early interventions, I just mentioned one of taking toothbrushes to women that you know are expecting or currently planning to become pregnant. Another thing you could do is try to have more conversations and maybe go with her to her prenatal appointments and ask questions to her provider if she's not able to ask those questions. Make sure that she has access to a doula and knows what a doula is, or maybe even a midwife. Just talk to her about different opportunities for her to take agency of her pregnancy and to not just be told by European white America how she needs to deliver her baby. On that same note, it's so important that we encourage physical activity before she even conceives the baby. So like in middle school, we need to be encouraging her to work out, get her heart rate up, do what she needs to do. I think we're socialized where we're not comfortable exercising because there's so many reasons, but when that heart rate is pumping, that's the best thing that you can do for your body, because that's allowing your muscle, your heart, to build. So we want to encourage that as much as we can. And we also want to make sure that we are trying to take down some of those barriers and giving her access. So instead of maybe buying her, a 12 Kit Kat bar pack, because that's okay, she can eat that too, but really trying to introduce her to new fruits and vegetables, new ways of cooking fruits and vegetables so that her taste buds can thrive and be challenged in a new way, and also give her new ideas of how to cook. And then last but not least, breastfeeding, I cannot stress this enough. This is so important. You actually burn calories when you breastfeed. And we want to really get beyond this notion that 6 months and then we introduce other supplements. If she can breastfeed for 2 years or longer, that is so good for her and for the baby. And I can't stress that enough. So if you would like more information, feel free to message me on the chat. I'm monitoring that as we go, but I just wanted to put that plug in there. Thank you so much, Daddy.
Sakura, thank you. Is such a critical part of this whole question. So thank you for giving us that vital information on gestational diabetes. And like Shakura said, you can type in any questions or comments. If you're on Zoom, you can do it in the chat. If you're on Facebook, you can just do it in the comment section. Shakura is monitoring the Zoom chat. I'm monitoring the Facebook page. So go ahead and do that, and we'll respond to it during the course of this hour. And so we'll just keep going on the theme that Shakura very clearly articulated. We want to broaden the perspective of diabetes and include the question of this COVID-19 virus and the question of white supremacy. So, we know that diabetes was already a pandemic among colonized people, African people, indigenous people. It was already something that was causing grave issues in our collective communities. And Shakur touched on it, but one of the reasons for that is because we don't have access to quality food. The food that we have, a lot of our people live in food deserts. We don't have the capacity to get quality food that has the fiber that burns slow enough so that it doesn't immediately convert to sugar in our system as soon as we eat it. And so that's a major issue. Almost half of the millions of diabetes sufferers are African and indigenous people in the US. And then now we see over the last decade or so, diabetes becoming a horrific problem in Africa. And the reason for this is because within that period of time, these genetically modified foods have and plantings have become commonplace in Africa because people don't have the resources to grow food on their own. So you see the growth of Monsanto and companies like that in Africa, and you see processed food. When I first started going to Africa, the first time I went was 1991, and there was virtually no Western food there, no fast food, nothing like that. I mean, people ate traditional African food, which is my favorite food on the planet. There's nothing better than a plate of freshly grown African vegetables, banku, tilapia, jollof rice. That is the favorite food on earth. It's the best food on earth to me. But now when you go to Africa, it's a little more difficult to find that food. What you find everywhere is KFC and McDonald's and all of these GMO sponsored corporate death food entities. And because people don't have money and that food is much cheaper, a lot more people there are eating that. So now diabetes, hypertension, the same problems that impacted African people in the West are now issues in Africa as well. And I used to get so upset when people would say here in the US, well, diabetes for African people it's a hereditary disease. And I would say, well, if it was hereditary, how come it's not an issue in Africa? Because that was true, as I said, up until a few years ago. Well, it's not a hereditary disease unless you look at it in terms of hereditary oppression. Then yeah, without question, it's a disease that has hereditary components to it. So, we talked about the inability of people to afford natural foods in Africa, GMOs, and what that's doing there. And so all of these issues combined, the food deserts in the Western Hemisphere and Africa, neocolonialism, and capitalist exploitation. The fact that every government in Africa today is controlled by neocolonialism. And what that means is that the governments there are governments that are installed to represent the interests of imperialism. So that's why GMOs like Monsanto have found such an easy path to enter into Africa and do business and make so much money there, because the people who are in governing positions, they are only interested in two things: ensuring that the resources of Africa are made available to multinational capitalism, and to ensure that they line their own pockets. And so this has been the reality in Africa for the last 50 plus years. And as a result, the people in every African community suffer immensely. So when we look at COVID and diabetes, you know, like Shakur mentioned, many low-income people, limited income, systemic unhealthy food intake. And then now the reality we have now is that, you know, people are stressed. No, we don't know what's going to happen. This COVID-19 crisis has created a serious air of uncertainty. You know, people are struggling with being able to know if they're going to have a job coming up, if they're going to be able to pay their bills, put food on the table. So this is a very stressful time, and stress is not a friend to diabetes, because when you're stressed, I know this is true for me, that's when you're most likely to eat food, comfort foods that are not foods that are going to be complementary to your battle to control your diabetes. If you even have food to eat, and if you don't, if you're stressed, a lot of people get stressed, they don't eat. That's an even more difficult issue, because you know your immunity system is going to be somewhat compromised, and so you're going to need to ensure that you're eating to ensure that you have the energy to properly sustain yourself. So these are challenges that are being faced. And then the fact that people are, you know, your movements are very limited right now. I mean, you don't have places to go that you would typically go to. And so for a lot of people, especially if your income is severely limited, then that translates to just staying in the house, sitting on the couch, watching television and eating. And oftentimes eating things that are not the best things that you need to be eating. The environment that we're in now promotes and sustains all of those things I just mentioned for everybody, but especially for those people suffering from diabetes, because movement is the ally to health against diabetes. If you're not moving and you're diabetic, you are setting yourself up for potential disaster. So these conditions that we're immersed in right now, you know, it's really creating havoc for people who already were having a difficult time managing their diabetes in a healthy way. And now, because of the limitations, it makes it even that much more difficult. So, you know, diabetes plus COVID-19, it means a lot of people not feeling good every day. You're already not feeling well because of, you know, the impacts of this virus and the sheltering in place and all of the, you know, uncertainties that face us. But when you don't have your diabetes under control, you are not going to feel well physically. You're going to always lack energy. It's a struggle to even get up out of bed when your diabetes is functioning uncontrolled. And then you don't feel well. You have all of the impacts that come with it, the neuropathic nerve pain, or diabetes nerve pain, as they call it, the shooting pain that the picture depicts, where you feel like something's stabbing you in your feet area, in your legs, those pains, and they're overwhelming pains. And so a lot of people, by not being able to move, because when you're diabetic and you make sure your blood is flowing, that's how you keep it from clotting. And so obviously exercise is the best way you do that. And if that's not happening, then, you know, again and again, you're setting yourself up for these bad scenarios to become dominant. So I just want to share, you know, some of the ways in the last 18 years that I've been able to effectively manage my diabetes. You know, diabetes is a very interesting disease in the sense that it's a disease that's devastating. It's a disease that kills, but it's also a disease that you can control. You have the ability to control it. It's not like cancer or, you know, other types of disease or HIV that you can't control them once you get them. With diabetes, you can control it, but it's going to require you making decisions in your life that will enable you to do that. I am a person, I don't get high. I don't drink alcohol. I don't go out chasing women and doing those things. So, you know, I have to be very creative about how I release my stress and how I manage my anxiety. So, you know, I used to love to get a piece of red velvet cake, and that would be my comfort food, or a donut, or something along those lines. But once this reality came into my life about type 2 diabetes, I realized that, and as I got older with it, like your body is not going to be able to do what it did before. I realized that that I'd have to change that reality. So, you know, I acknowledge up front, like a lot of the things that I do are pretty extreme. And so a lot of people are just not going to be willing to do that. But my goal was I didn't want to be injecting myself with insulin, with artificial insulin. I had no desire to do that ever in my life. And so I made a goal that I wanted to manage my diabetes without having to do that, just by my diet and exercise. The only thing that I allow myself to do would be to take sugar pills, but I don't even have to do that, fortunately. So, you know, some of the things that are required is that you have to make sure that you discipline your life. If you're going to beat this thing, you have to make sure that you discipline your life. And that's going to mean, for me, especially now, like I would go to the gym every morning and I ride my bike to work pretty much every day, 90% of the time. And I do everything I can to get movement in my body. I don't take elevators anywhere. I park far away from the door at supermarkets so I can walk. I just engage in a systemic process of ensuring that I get exercise every single day so that my blood can flow. And that's just a decision that I had to make. I mean, it's a decision anyone can make. You can make that decision. It's just up to you, but you have to do it. Now, you know, my process is probably a little more intense. You know, I engage in workouts, I lift weights, I work on a speed bag, I ride my bike everywhere. In fact, when I get through here, I'm gonna go on a bike ride. And then I do all those things. And then also another thing that I do that is very helpful is I engage in the activism and the organizing work I do, because it's fulfilling, because I feel like I'm making a contribution to make the world better, and that makes me feel better. And since that makes me feel better, then I don't have the urge to eat everything in sight all the time. And so that's helpful. So whether it's through the activism I'm engaged in, or whether it's through the writing that I do, or even just understanding the necessity of having positive relationships with the people around you, surrounding yourself with positive people who are going to encourage you in your fight against diabetes. That's very important. You know, if you're living with someone and they're eating cupcakes and potato chips all the time, that's very difficult for you to be able to discipline yourself to not do those things all the time. So you have to, you know, make the decision and do whatever's necessary to surround yourself with people who are going to support this very important struggle that you're engaged in your life. And that's the thing that a lot of people really have a hard time doing. But I'm just here to say that it can be done, you know, if you just decide you want to do things. The other thing is diet, because the thing you have to understand about diabetes is it's a simple math equation, you all. That's what it is. How many carbs are you intaking? How many carbs are you burning off? It's just that simple. If you're intaking more, if you're diabetic and you're intaking more carbs than you're burning off, at some point, you're going to have serious health issues. There's no way around that. If you're diabetic and you're burning off more carbs than you're intaking, you can manage your diabetes. It is really just that simple. So it doesn't matter how much you work out. If you're not eating the right things, you're going to have issues. So again, for me, it required me making serious decisions about my diet. And so I made the decision many years ago to stop eating all meats except seafood. I'm addicted to seafood, and I just never could bring myself to stop eating seafood. One day, I'm still working on that. Maybe one day I'll cut that out too. Now, Shakura has been vegan for about a decade now, and she's had a major influence on me. And I even did that with her for about a year and a half back in 2013. But I just had dreams every night of shrimp and crab, and I just didn't have the strength to stop doing that. But still, even with eating the seafood, I eat leafy green vegetables every day. as much as I can. If I don't cook them for a meal, then I put them in my morning smoothie shake that I make after I work out. I stopped eating processed sugar 2 years ago. I haven't had a donut or red velvet cake or any of that stuff in 2 years. And that, my friends, has been the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life, because baked goods are a Jamu's weakness. They're my kryptonite. But I realized I had to do it. And so what I do is I do eat things that are made with natural sugars, cane sugar, brown sugar. Those have more, they take a much longer to process through my bloodstream and, through anybody's bloodstream. And so I find that I can eat those things. So like bean pies, which are navy bean pies, pies made with navy beans, and usually cane sugar or brown sugar. I can eat those, and I've tested it for years and years, and my blood sugar doesn't rise. So I get my joy from bean pies. In fact, Shakur helped me find a place to order them a week or so ago, and I ordered some because of this pandemic. I'm not able to find any here in the town I live in like I normally would. The place where I would go is not open. So I ordered some online, and I got them Friday, and all weekend I've been enjoying bean pie. So those little victories in life, just make it so much easier for me to wage this fight for myself. But you have to establish those protocols. You have to establish, what goes in your body, what you do to burn off what goes in your body. And you have to have the discipline to do that. Even during this pandemic, no longer being able to go to the gym, I get up every morning 5 days a week in my living room, and I've made a makeshift exercise area, and I go through the motion of going through my exercises for at least an hour, and I go at it. I go at it hard. I don't just go through the motions of it. I sit there, but that's not what I do. I go at it hard. And I did that because when this pandemic started, I told myself, look, if you don't get serious about this, it's going to be a problem. Because one thing I know about my body, it would not take long if I stopped doing all the things I did for me to start having problems with my diabetes. It wouldn't take long at all. So I know I have to stay out in front of it. So I made that decision, and I've kept to it for these 6-7 weeks, as long as this is. And, if you can't find dumbbells like the one in the picture, then, get you some bags of rice, put them in some buckets, and get a broomstick. Just do whatever you have to do to make sure you're getting in your exercise so you can feel better. Okay. So we talked about, surrounding yourself with positive people who are actually engaging in support for you, and hopefully living lives that are supportive of your fight against diabetes. Like if if the people around you always want to drink alcohol and eat junk food, there's nothing wrong with them doing those things, but you doing those things will kill you. So you have to find ways to surround yourself with people who can support what you're doing. And then understand that organization is key to this. This is why we're saying, Shakur and I are saying, diabetes is not just a physical disease, it's a political disease, it's a social disease. The reason why African people and indigenous people suffer from diabetes so much more than everyone else is because of our political and economic conditions oppressed by capitalism. That is the reason why we suffer as much. And we've already talked about the reasons why. Just to eat the way I eat, honestly, it's not cheap. I earn a decent income, so I can afford to buy whatever I want to buy to eat. But most people don't have that luxury. And they don't even have access to food that they need, food that's pictured in this picture. So it's very difficult for them. So it's important for us to understand that, our ability to organize, to fight against this oppression is a key to wiping out these pandemics, all of these pandemics. None of them are not related to capitalism. Each and every pandemic you can think of, I can show you how it's directly connected to capitalism. And we've spent the last several weeks demonstrating to you how COVID-19 is a direct result of capitalism. And we're talking today about diabetes being that. So we have to ensure that people are involved in this fight, because with this fight, we can begin to create better societies. You have if you talk about socialist Cuba, and I talk about Cuba a lot, I make no apologies for that. I've been talking about Cuba a lot for almost 40 years now, and I'll continue to talk about it. I was talking about Cuba when people said, well, as soon as Fidel Castro dies, there won't be any socialism in Cuba. And I'm still trying to find those people now. I can't find any of them. And I'll continue to talk about socialist Cuba, because in socialist Cuba, people who practice medical professions are treated like heroes. They're treated in Cuba the way they want to condition you to treat police and military here in this country. And so clearly that's backward, to treat police and military as anything other than what they are, protectors of the capitalist system. That's exactly what they are. But in Cuba, the medical workers receiving this respect, it's because they have created a society there where things like diabetes are not pandemics there. They're not an issue, because there's one doctor for every 20 people in Cuba, compared to one doctor for every thousands of people here in capitalist US. So that's very important, to have a society that is organized around ensuring people's health is a priority. And that type of society has to be a socialist society. It's not going to be a capitalist society. There's no capitalist society on earth that's doing that. So that's why that's so important. And you have to see your individual struggle with diabetes as part of the struggle for human and forward progress. It's not separate from that. It's not your individual fight. That's not what this is. It's individual in the sense that you have to do the things that we're talking about, but this is without question a collective fight. And we are not going to be able to win it until we change the society. So make sure that you are seeing that you're not alone. You have people out here waging this fight with you. I'm fighting diabetes. I'm fighting COVID-19. I'm fighting against capitalism, imperialism, patriarchy, homophobia. I'm fighting all of them, white supremacy. So you're not alone in your fight. We just have to link up together to wage this fight and encourage each other. We should have a revolutionary anti-diabetes support group organization that engages in political education and organizing work, providing quality food for people who are diabetic, challenging all these capitalist obstacles to people who make it difficult for them to maintain their health. We should have an organization that's specifically dedicated to doing that, because it's a social justice fight. So with that, we are kind of early, but we're done. I don't see any questions around this, so I'll just summarize quickly. And the summary is that, again, for those who have joined late, when we talk about insulin, we're talking about a natural chemical that goes into the bloodstream from the pancreas. And the work of that chemical is to break down the sugars that you consume. And by sugars, we mean carbohydrates. Anything that is not meat or leafy green vegetables is a carbohydrate. Whether it's rice, whether it's candy, whether it's donuts, whether it's hamburger buns, it's a carbohydrate. And so how your body processes it depends upon the quality of the carbohydrate you're consuming. If it's a processed food, like potato chips or candy bars, it will process very quickly through your system. It'll turn to sugar immediately. And if you're diabetic, you're either type 1, not producing any insulin, or you're type 2, like me, you're not producing enough. And so the question is, how are you going to manage this mathematical equation? How are you going to manage how many carbs you intake and how many carbs you burn off? And the answer is, you're going to have to make a decision to ensure that what you're eating are what are called complex carbs, or carbs that take longer to break down into sugar, because the longer they take, the more your body can catch up and process and burn them off for energy, which is what your body does with carbohydrates. So you have to develop a diet where you're eating mostly complex carbs. Now, you can, like, I had an endocrinologist tell me once, because I told him I love donuts, and I this was in 2002. I just couldn't see myself giving up donuts. That was like, really, at that time, was really unfair to me for someone to expect me to have to do that. That's all I had, I told him, to eat that I enjoyed. And the endocrinologist told me, well, you can eat donuts, but your body can only absorb so much sugar before it's going to become a problem because you're not if you want to not take insulin shots, which, as I mentioned, was a goal. I didn't want to have to do that. I wanted to control my diabetes myself through my diet and exercise. So he said, well, you could do that, but that would mean for dinner, you have to take like one of those small donuts, not even a big donut, but one of those very small donuts, and you have to eat that, and that's probably going to be all you're going to be able to eat. And I'm like, no, that's not going to work, because more so than my love for donuts was my love for food. And so, that would just make me mad to do that. So you have to figure out that mathematical equation. How many carbs are you going to intake? How many are you going to burn off? And you have to have a process to ensure that you're eating as many of those complex carbs that take longer to burn off. And then you have to have an exercise program. You have to engage in some exercise. Now, you don't have to do what I do. What I do every morning, like tomorrow morning, I'll get up, I'll lift. I couldn't find dumbbells that were heavy enough because everybody's bought them due to this pandemic. You can't find dumbbells. Dumbbells are like toilet paper in the stores. So what I have is two 25-pound dumbbells. So I'll do, I'll lift them. I'll do sets of, I'll do like 150 reps with those. And then I'll do curls of like 100 reps. And then I'll do 100 push-ups. I'll do 100 crunches. I'll do 40. Then I'll do burpees. And that's what I do every day. So you may not do that, and you don't have to, but if nothing else, like do 25 jumping jacks every day. Start there and do that. Just something to get your blood flowing. And if you're diabetic, if you do that, if you do just right there, if you do 25 jumping jacks, you're not feeling good because your blood is full of this sugar that's not being burned off. And you just can't even feel like you can't even get up off the couch. If you get up and you do, I'll even say 15, you do 15 jumping jacks. You just figure out a way to get 15 jumping jacks done. You will immediately feel much better. Why? Because your blood is now flowing through your body, which your blood is supposed to do. Your heart is pumping. You will feel so much better. And the more you do that, the more your body will become addicted to feeling better. And so the great difficulty you feel when you start doing it will eventually evaporate. It'll become much, much, much easier for you to do it. But you have to start. It's like anything in life. Sekou Touré told us quantity makes quality. You have to practice, 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 practice. You have to do that. So of course it's going to be hard at first. Anything worthwhile is difficult when you first start doing it. And anything worthwhile is going to take some work on your part to achieve it. So if you're not willing to deal with any type of discomfort, then you're just not willing to live life, because life is about confronting discomfort, challenging it, and working through it. That's how you become stronger as a human being. So you have to be willing to do that. There is no easy way around diabetes. There is no easy way around eliminating oppression. There's no easy way around delivering babies. There's no easy way around doing anything that is worthwhile in life. Anything worthwhile requires hard work. I'll never forget a program we had years ago. It was an All-African Women's Revolutionary Union conference that we had here in Sacramento at the university. And Shakura was a small child there at the conference sitting on my lap, I remember. And the speaker was a sister named Evelyn Mtafuta Ukweli. And one of the young sisters in the audience asked her, like, well, because Evelyn was talking a lot about hair and wearing natural African hair as opposed to, straightening your hair and processing it to make it look European. And one of the young sisters there who had a processed hairstyle asked her, well, what's the big deal about hair? And Evelyn said, it just takes so long when my hair is natural to do it. And Evelyn's response was, anything worthwhile is going to take longer. And that always stuck with me. That was about 30 years ago. but it's always stuck with me because the point that I felt like she was making is that you have to be willing to put into something what you want to get out of it. No way around that. You got to put into it to get out of it. So if you want to feel better, you're going to have to make a commitment to do the work so that you can feel better. If you want a better world, you're going to have to commit to do the work to make sure we can have a better world. Nobody's going to be able to make you feel better if you don't do the work yourself. No one is going to be able to make us free and have a society based on justice unless you're willing to do that work. So with that, we'll just go ahead and get ready to close out a little early this week. We want to thank everybody for coming. Shakur, did you have anything you wanted to add before we close?
I do. So I do see a comment from Glenn, but I just wanted to add personally before I read Glenn's comment that I couldn't agree with you more on, just trying to build up the courage to start a workout regimen. So for me, I don't know if this helps any of you, but what I try to do is I try to set an intention for every time I work out. I hear a lot of yoga instructors telling me that, and I think that it's really important to do that because it helps you stay focused on why you're doing what you're doing. So for me personally, I hate mountain climbers. Like, I really hate doing mountain climbers. I know some people might love that. I would do burpees all day long, but I hate mountain climbers. But when I do mountain climbers, my heart rate increases more. So I intentionally focus on doing them. And one day I might devote my practice to the essential workers who are putting their lives on the line. Today, I devoted my practice to any student who is struggling with distance learning, whether they be a kindergartner or someone in college. So I think if you remind yourself, this ties into the whole keeping in mind that your struggle is not just your struggle, but it's about colonialism and all these other things. If you set that intention and you focus your practice or your workout on what you were trying to do, then you're constantly reminding yourself why you're doing it. And for me, doing mountain climbers is one of the best ways that I can take down capitalism because I'm healthy enough to do it. But I can't take down capitalism if my heart is not able to work. So if it helps, just set an intention. Maybe my dad said 15 jumping jacks. Maybe if you're expecting your child and you don't want to do too much because it's just a lot for you, maybe you just walk in place. Even doing laundry, you're burning calories doing that when you're picking out clothes from the dryer and things like that. So just try to keep in mind that we're burning calories all the time. It's just a question of getting that heart rate up so that you could really burn them as much as you can. And so Glenn, thank you so much for your patience. So Glenn said there's something about sugar or something blocking the pores, air quotes, and molecules that are supposed to absorb the sugar. What's that process? I think it helps to see the permanent damage it causes to take diabetes seriously. And then Uncle Nidamu, oh, okay, that was for me privately. Sorry, yeah, so that's what Glenn said.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm familiar or if I'm understanding, what's being asked. But what I do know is that, as I mentioned, the foods that you eat, type of foods that turn into carbs, you have to burn them off. If there's other processes that are engaged in doing that, I'm not familiar with that. But what works for me is I know when I eat, if I eat something that is not going to have so many simple carbs in it, then that coupled with my, daily exercise, I don't have any, I've for 18 years, I haven't had any of the issues related to diabetes. I don't have the nerve pain happening. I don't, I have plenty of energy. I don't have any of those issues. So I think that's, and I can tell by how my blood sugar is regulated that it's managed, right? So, that works. Just doing that works. So Shakur, thank you for saying that. It's so important. And I wanted to add, some people can't do jumping jacks. They're just not physically going to be able to do them for whatever reason. So, find something that you can do, even if it's just stretching, not just, but even if it's stretching, do that, do something. We have to find some way to get your body moving. That's the point. Please don't focus on, well, he said jumping jacks, I can't do jumping jacks, so obviously there's nothing I can do. No, we have to find something you can do to get your body moving. So that's the point, because the more your body moves, some way we have to get your heart rate up. Even like you said, just taking a walk, even if you're in a wheelchair, get a manual wheelchair. You know, I bought one for my mom once for $10 at a Goodwill store. So, you know, find a way to get a manual wheelchair if you don't already have one, and, you know, find a way to get outside and move a couple of blocks, that'll get your blood, you know, you pumping those wheels, moving, that'll get your blood rate going. So anything you can do to do that, that's what you want to be doing. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Like Shakur said, you can do it, you know, if you do laundry, if you do yard work, whatever it is you can do, just make sure you're doing something every day. And then the other things, like the daily things you can do, don't sleep on those things. Like, you know, not looking for a parking space right next to the door of where you're going. Try to park far away and walk upstairs. Don't take elevators. You know, it's going to be hard at first because your body's not used to doing it. But if you go slow and you do it, you'll get used to it, and you'll start getting better. Your legs will get stronger. The reason why it's as hard as it is, at least partially, is because your legs are not used to being exerted. So you try to walk upstairs and your legs are like, what in the heck are you trying to do? This is not what we do. But so you have to train your legs to do it. So, you know, just anything you can do to do that is going to help you in this regard. And then the last thing, as always, is you have to be involved in some organization working for justice with a political education program that's anti-capitalist, anti-patriarchal, anti-white supremacy, anti-colonial, anti-homophobia. And this is so important. I just talked to someone the other day who followed up from the last seminar last week. And they reached out because they said the organization they belong to, they were inspired by some of our work in the AAPRP, and they went to them and they were like, we should start a political education program. And nobody wanted to do it in the organization. They're like, we don't have time for that. We don't feel like we need to do that. We don't need blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, the person was disheartened, and I tried to encourage them to not give up, to keep going, to keep pushing for that. But that's why we mention this every week. Because some of you might think, well, why do you keep mentioning that? But the reason why we keep mentioning is people do not get it in this society, in this world. They don't get the necessity for political education. People are not understanding the importance of having a study process independent of the information being provided to you by imperialism. If all the information you have is what's provided by imperialism, you're in trouble. Even if you're trying to read books yourself individually, you're still in trouble because your ability to interpret the information, Marcus Garvey said that you can't just interpret the world by yourself because you only live 70, 80 years and the world is millions of years old. So we just don't live long enough for us to understand this world in a proper context. So when you connect with other people, now if you have 5 people and everybody lives 80 years, now you got hundreds of years experience. So that just makes you stronger in terms of your ability to interpret and come up with solutions. So we have to get this message to people that they understand that we've got to be engaged in this political education process. We got to get people doing that. There is no way we're going to solve any of this until we understand that point. It is not going to happen by voting for some old capitalist crony in a progressive rhetorical suit to solve our problems. That has not worked in 300 years. I don't know why people think it's going to work now. That is not going to solve the problems that we have. The only thing that's going to solve it is us getting together and organizing. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is because we understand the necessity to do that. And the only way we're going to understand it is by engaging in this political education that will train us of the importance of gaining this information and using this information to go get more people. So we're going to let you go. We're going to be back next Sunday. Look for our next topic, 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Let people know. We'll have a topic next week that hopefully can continue to inspire, encourage people to join organizations, political education, keep doing whatever work that you're doing. And if you're not in an organization, start I wish that father-daughter would shut up organization and organize that organization for justice and forward progress and human dignity. Thank you. Forward ever, backwards never. The All-African People's Revolutionary Party is ready for revolution. We hope that you are too. Forward ever, everyone.